So a while ago I was doing that E3 video where I talked about how Konami won because they announced the PC Engine Mini. But I didn't really mention why I'm so excited for that console in particular. Well, the reason is that the PC Engine library basically is a kind of like a new system to me, a relatively new system. 10 years ago I had never even seen a Hue card before. And this is all because the PC Engine and TurboGrafx was never actually released in my region. I've seen some other YouTube videos, mostly from Americans, who are talking about how they were the only kid on the street who had a TurboGrafx-16, or they only knew one other person who had one. So while the console was released in Japan and was massively popular, released in America where it was a little bit less popular, here in Europe it was only released in a couple of countries, namely the UK, France and Spain. So while I'm sure someone up here in Scandinavia probably have imported a system, it wasn't anyone I knew, and nobody even talked about it in the gaming magazines I used to buy back then. But yeah, about 8 or 9 years ago I kind of discovered the library for myself when I was messing around with some emulators. And at first glance I didn't really think much about it, and that was because I was just looking at the titles that I kind of knew already, the titles that kind of popped into my eye. Like, oh, I know Afterburn already, I know Space Harrier, and they were okay. But at that time when you could emulate arcade games, it was rarely worth it to really mess around with any of the home console ports of these arcade games. But over the years I've started digging more into the TurboGrafx PC Engine library. I've chatted with friends about the system, I've seen videos from other YouTubers who have talked about the system, and there's just a lot of fantastic games that haven't really gotten the eyes on them that they deserve. Now, some of the games have been available digitally, mostly on the Wii Virtual Console specifically, and they also put out a couple of games on the Japanese PlayStation 3 network. But all these Hudson and NEC games are owned by Konami these days, and as you all know, Konami has kind of been sitting on the fence a little bit with all their IPs. Mostly because they haven't really had anyone who could bring them back in a meaningful way. I mean, they've tried, we've seen plenty of Silent Hill games in the 360 and PlayStation 3 library, but they never really nailed what the games were about. And yeah, and then they sort of just gave up. A lot of people are really mad at them about that, about switching to pachinko games, but I think it's actually smart. Instead of ruining your IPs, your treasured IPs, by putting out a bunch of garbage games, it's probably smarter to just sit on them and wait. And I think that time is probably now with the PC Engine Mini. And they're not messing around with this console at all. I mean, if you look at the library of TurboGrafx versus PC Engine games, there's a substantial amount of Japanese games that you wouldn't want to miss on a console like this. But there's also a handful of classics that you kind of want to play in English, specifically the RPGs like Ys and Newtopia. So putting those games together, the Japanese and the English games, on one console is honestly the greatest thing that could happen with this product. And looking back, I think they kind of hinted that they were going to do something a little bit like this when they announced how which console would get in each region, because Japanese get the PC Engine, America get the TurboGrafx-16, and here in Europe we get the Core Graphics system, a system that never came out in Europe at all. I think the European model we got was more akin to the TurboGrafx system, and the Core Graphics is a later revision of the original PC Engine in Japan exclusive hardware. So there was already clues there that something was up, and now we know why. It's because they're putting the same 50 games across all three different looking systems, so you can kind of pick and choose what kind of model you want. I was tempted to import the PC Engine model all the way from Japan, but I kind of like the Core Graphics system. I think I'm gonna get that one, definitely. But yeah, getting back to my experience with these games, these are just such amazing and fantastic games that have been locked away from a long time, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one who's never played these games. So I'm really excited that more people are getting to experience the PC Engine library, especially the PC Engine CD games. Now, these types of games I only discovered like a couple of years ago, and I mentioned it in one of my video reviews, I think it was of Double Dragon 2, that this is just perfect. This is pretty much everything I wanted from CD-ROM games back in the day. Back when CD-ROM games were new and CD-ROM drives were a new invention, I had a PC, a personal computer, and the popular thing to do to fill out this gap of the extra storage allowed on the CD-ROM games was to fill it with full motion video. And honestly, these all looked quite terrible, and that was because it was still very early years for video compression technology. So you had these video converters or video codecs that could only display the videos in like a tiny window, very highly compressed and pixelated to look at. Now, when the PC Engine got its CD-ROM drive, I don't think they had any kind of video decoder, and that was actually kind of a blessing in disguise, because what they used the space for instead was Redbook audio, and I think they had some extra memory lying around somewhere in these systems, which allowed them to render cutscenes that weren't full motion video, but rather these massive sprites. And here in 2019, where we're all about modding our systems to make everything look as crisp as possible, the PC Engine has held up. These massive sprites are just razor sharp compared to crummy full motion video footage from the early 90s, and it simply looks fantastic. So that we're getting these massive CD-ROM games from the PC Engine and TurboGrafx library like Rondo of Blood, Choaniki Star Parodia, Ys Book 1 and 2, that's just perfect. And I think a lot of people who are gonna plug in this system around launch day and expect something like the Mega Drive or the Super Nintendo library of games, I think they're gonna be pleasantly surprised about just how great these games look and sound. We're also getting two SuperGrafx games on the system, one being Ghosts and Goblins and the other one being Eldyne, a fantastic shooter that probably have been massively overlooked because the SuperGrafx add-on wasn't very successful at all in Japan. It only ever got 5 games for it, and here we have 2 of them, 2 of the best ones actually. And since it wasn't very successful, these games are also massively expensive to pick up if you want to run out and buy them on eBay or import them from Japan elsewhere. And let me tell you about Eldyne, because it's a pretty good shooter, but the soundtrack is amazing. It's probably one of the best shooter soundtracks I've ever heard, way up there with Zero Wing and Thunder Force 4. I mean, it's so good that if I just start up here, if I just play the intro, you'd think you were about to play a Castlevania game. And the rest of the score is so great that I have a hard time to pick a favorite actually. Now, looking over the library of the system, there are some pretty big omissions in my personal opinion, and I think everybody can agree on that, and everybody has their own favorites. I'd probably put Splatterhouse on it, because that's a big classic on the PC Engine. I'd probably also put Bloody Wolf on it, because that's a game I've been playing recently and had a lot of fun with. And surprisingly enough, if you look over the content of the PC Engine Mini, there isn't actually any kind of run and gun games that I could spot. I mean, I'd even put Last Alert on this one. It's not a very good game, but I like it. It has its charms.
Guy Kazama, if you don't want the hostage killed, you should keep quiet.
Guy, the stealth bomber is in the back of this factory.
Okay, Spartan, hang in there just a while longer.
And if we want to dig into some of the more weirder games, I'd probably also put Geisha Boy on it. It's this photography game where you gotta run around and take pictures of weird stuff. Technically a rail shooter kinda, but with shooting pictures instead of shooting people. And that's a insanely fun game. And one of those great import games that is easy to understand and play even though it's in Japanese. Now, I have heard a few people on social media and on YouTube and stuff be a little bit concerned that they're doubling up on some of the games, putting them both in English and in Japanese on the system, because then it isn't quite 50 games as they claim it to be. But you know, 50 games is a lot. They could have put 20 games, they could have put 30 games on this thing, but we get 50. 50! That's a big number compared to some of those other mini consoles out there. And the big one everyone wants in English obviously is Snatcher, because the PC Engine version is the last true uncensored version of that game. But you know, Konami is not gonna go in there and translate it into English just for the sake of releasing it on this mini console. It would be cool if they did. I'm not saying that I don't want it, but I haven't played the PC Engine version, but I know how a lot of these PC Engine CD-ROM games work. I have played the Sega CD version of the game, and if it's anything like that, there's a lot of voiced dialogue lines that don't have any subtitles in it at all. So either you have to go in and reprogram the game to add subtitles to everything and then translate them to English, or then you had to undergo an even bigger task of making a voiced English localization of the game, and that's simply not gonna happen.
見たな、ジャンカ。
あの爪痕は
ジャンがつけたものです。死んでもらうわ、ジャンカ。
I mean, the console is gonna be $100 American. If you had to put in that extra work for it, it would probably be closer to $200 or $300 even. And if they were gonna do all that work, they shouldn't just keep that version on one mini console. They should probably also release it for other modern platforms as well. It would be great, but not a very realistic thing to have, I think. But yeah, this system has a ton of great games on it that people have never played before probably, and I think they're in for a treat. And let's say there turns out to be some kind of unofficial way to like alter the library of the games included. Well, then taking out the Japanese CD-ROM games that you don't like will ensure that there are absolutely plenty of internal storage on this unit to put any other game on this system. But yeah, this system comes out in 2020, and if you have a broad, moderate interest in retro games and have never played any PC Engine or TurboGrafx before, I think you should check it out. But as always, I want to thank you for watching, thank you for subscribing, and an extra big thank you to my Patreons who are supporting me with as little as $1 a month, which you can too if you follow the link below the video.